There is something my grandmother Rachel did every single night of her life for as long as I can remember. Every night, without exception, even during the hardest years of her life, years I will not describe in detail, but that you can imagine because she was from Waj and she survived things that should have broken a person entirely. Even then, she did this practice, and she lived to 98 years old without a single medication until she was 90. Not a sleeping pill, not an anti-anxiety prescription, not even a regular aspirin. She slept deeply, she woke refreshed, and her mind stayed sharp until the very end. When I was in my 40s, burned out, hormonally depleted, waking at 3 a.m., staring at the ceiling with a mind that would not quiet, I finally asked her what she was doing each night before she closed her eyes. She looked at me the way only a bubby can look at you, with that particular mixture of love and exasperation, and she said, "Sarah, I am returning what was borrowed." I did not understand that for years. Now, after 4 decades in medicine and a complete transformation of my own health, I understand it completely. And today I am going to teach it to you. I am Dr. Sarah Levine. I trained at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem at Hadassah Medical School, and I have spent more than 40 years in preventive medicine, the last 20 of them devoted entirely to understanding why certain women age with vitality, clarity, and strength, while others, often equally educated, equally motivated, slowly lose ground year after year. The difference almost never comes down to a drug or a supplement. It comes down to a system, a very old system, one that Jewish women have been practicing for 3,000 years. What I teach is called the 7 Jewish Laws of Longevity. I have spent 4 decades documenting, testing, and scientifically validating each of these laws, pulling them from my grandmother's handwritten notebooks, from the texts of Maimonides, from the Torah, and from the most rigorous research coming out of institutions like the National Institutes of Health, the University of Rochester, and Harvard Medical School. Each law is a strand in a rope. Today, I am sharing one of the most essential of all 7, the one that governs uh, what happens to your body during the hours you are unconscious and vulnerable and trusting the night to restore you. By the end of this teaching, I will share something my grandmother only showed me once, late at night in her kitchen in Brooklyn. Something she called the most important thing a woman can do for herself that no one will ever see. But first, I need to tell you what is actually happening in your body every night and why, if you are like most women over 50 I have worked with, you are walking into sleep in a way that is actively working against your own restoration. Here is something that will change how you think about the hours between 10 at night and 6 in the morning. In 2013, researchers at the University of Rochester made one of the most significant discoveries in modern neuroscience. They discovered what they called the glymphatic system, a network of channels in the brain that, during deep sleep, floods the brain with cerebrospinal fluid and literally washes out metabolic waste products. Among the waste products cleared by this nightly cleaning process, amyloid beta and tau proteins, the exact proteins associated with cognitive decline and Alzheimer's disease. The glymphatic system does the majority of this work during the deep slow wave stages of sleep. And here's what they also found. Stress hormones, specifically cortisol and norepinephrine, dramatically reduce the efficiency of this process. When you go to bed in a state of unresolved tension, mental, emotional, physiological, your brain cannot clean itself properly. Night after night, year after year, the waste accumulates. My grandmother called sleep the gift of the 1/60th. That phrase comes from the Talmud, from Tractate Bereshit, which describes sleep as 1/60th of death. Not as something morbid, but as something sacred. Every night you surrender your consciousness. You enter a small, temporary state of unknowing. And during that surrender, if the conditions are right, something extraordinary happens. The body repairs, the mind integrates, the soul, in the Jewish understanding, briefly returns to its source and comes back renewed. The rabbis were not speaking metaphorically. They were describing, in the language available to them 3,000 years ago, precisely what Dr. Macon Nadergaard and her team at Rochester would confirm with MRI imaging in 2013. Before I teach you the practice itself, I want to be honest with you about what most of us are doing instead and why it is costing us so much more than we realize. Before we go further, I want you to type something in the comments. Type the words, "I choose to restore." Just those 3 words, because everything I'm about to teach you begins with the understanding that restoration is not passive. It is a choice. It is an active decision you make before your head touches the pillow. And that decision, that intentional turning toward repair, is the foundation of this entire law. Now let me tell you what is actually happening for most women over 50 in the hours before sleep. I know this because I lived it, and because I have worked with thousands of women who describe the same experience almost word for word. You are not sleeping well. You know you are not sleeping well. And when you try to explain this to your doctor, you are told that your blood work is normal, that some sleep disruption is expected at your age, and perhaps given a pamphlet about sleep hygiene that tells you to avoid screens and drink chamomile tea. You have tried the chamomile tea. It did not work. You have downloaded the sleep apps. You have bought the melatonin. You have tried going to bed earlier, going to bed later, opening a window, closing a window. And still, you wake between 2 and 4 in the morning with a mind that immediately begins generating to-do lists, unresolved conversations, and a low-grade but persistent sense of dread about nothing specific and everything at once. According to data published by the CDC, more than 35% of American adults report consistently sleeping fewer than 7 hours per night. But the numbers are dramatically worse for women in the perimenopausal and postmenopausal years. A landmark study published in the journal Menopause found that more than 60% of women aged 50 to 65 report significant sleep disturbances, and that these disturbances correlate directly with accelerated cognitive aging, increased inflammatory markers, weight gain, and reduced immune function. 60%. That means if you are in a room with 5 women your age, 3 of them are not sleeping, and most of them have been told this is simply what happens now. I have spent 4 decades in medicine, and I am here to tell you that this is not simply what happens. What happens is that we have lost a practice that was so embedded in Jewish life for so long that it became invisible, just part of the rhythm of the day, as ordinary as lighting candles on Friday night. And when the practice was lost, the consequences accumulated so slowly that we stopped connecting the cause to the effect. There are 3 reasons the conventional approaches to sleep fail women over 50 consistently. The first is that they treat sleep as a physical problem with a physical solution: melatonin, temperature, light exposure. These are not wrong, but they are incomplete. They address the room and ignore what you bring into the room. The second reason is that they underestimate the role of unresolved emotional tension in physiological dysregulation. Cortisol does not care that you intellectually understand you should relax. It responds to what your nervous system is actually holding. And the third reason, the one no one in conventional medicine talks about, is that there is no ritual container for the transition. You go from being fully engaged with the demands of your life to lying horizontal in a dark room, and your nervous system has no bridge between those two states. It keeps functioning as if there is still something to do, because nothing told it otherwise. Maimonides, the great 12th century physician and rabbi who served as the personal doctor to Sultan Saladin, wrote in his Regimen of Health, composed in 1198, that the quality of sleep is determined not by its duration but by the state of the body and mind at the moment of lying down. He described a specific sequence of practices to be performed before sleep, including what he called the clearing of the heart's burdens. Maimonides was not speaking poetically. He was writing as a physician. He understood, 800 years before the discovery of the stress response system, that what a person carries emotionally into sleep determines what the body is able to accomplish during it. This is one of the 7 Jewish laws of longevity that I have spent 40 years documenting. Today I am sharing this law, the law of sacred restoration. It is one that most women over 50 have never encountered in this form, and once you understand it, you will never walk into sleep the same way again. The practice I am going to teach you is rooted in Kriyat Shema al-Hamita, the recitation of the Shema at bedtime. This is an evening ritual that has been part of Jewish practice for over 2,000 years, described in the Talmud in Tractate Berachot, and expanded by the Kabbalistic tradition into a complete protocol for entering sleep consciously. Jewish women were practicing this nightly ritual centuries before modern sleep science had a vocabulary for what it was doing in the body. What I am giving you today is the practice in full: what to do, when to do it, how to do it, and the science that explains why it works. Here is what you will need. You need nothing you do not already have. No supplements, no devices, no special preparation. You need a consistent time. I recommend 30 minutes before you intend to sleep. You need a quiet space, seated or lying down, with no screens and no distractions. And you need approximately 10 minutes of your full attention. That is all. The practice has 4 steps, and I want you to understand each step in terms of what it is doing physiologically as well as spiritually, because this is not a religious practice requiring belief. It is a physiological protocol wearing ancient clothing. The first step is what I call the accounting. In Jewish tradition, this is known as Cheshbon Hanefesh, an inventory of the soul. For our purposes, it is a brief, honest review of the day just completed, not a rumination, not a list of failures. A simple, factual accounting: what happened today, what I did, what I left undone, what I felt. You do this silently or in writing if you prefer, in no more than 3 to 5 minutes. The purpose of this step is to move the day's events from the body into conscious awareness. Here is why this matters medically. Unprocessed emotional experience does not disappear when you stop thinking about it. It is held in the body as muscular tension, elevated cortisol, dysregulated breathing. Bringing it briefly into awareness, naming it, acknowledging it, initiates the prefrontal cortex's capacity to regulate the limbic system. Research from the University of California, Los Angeles, published in the journal Psychological Science, demonstrated that the simple act of naming an emotional experience reduces amygdala activation. Naming calms the alarm system. The Talmudic rabbis called this accounting an act of integrity. The neuroscientists call it affect labeling. The outcome is the same. The nervous system begins to settle. The second step is what I call the release. In the traditional bedtime practice, there is a prayer of forgiveness, a deliberate, formal act of releasing grievances held against anyone who caused hurt during the day. The traditional text states explicitly, "I hereby forgive anyone who has angered or vexed me." This is not spiritual bypassing. It is not pretending nothing happened. It is a deliberate physiological act. Research published in the Journal of Behavioral Medicine has shown that the practice of forgiveness, defined not as reconciliation, but as the internal release of resentment, measurably reduces nighttime cortisol levels and improves both sleep onset and sleep architecture, meaning the proportion of time spent in deep, restorative sleep. You are not forgiving for the other person's benefit. You are forgiving because carrying anger into sleep is like trying to run a complex cleaning cycle in a machine that is still switched on. This step takes 60 seconds. You review, briefly, anyone from the day who caused irritation or hurt. You say, internally or aloud, I release this. Not forever. Not as a statement of what is acceptable. Simply, I put this down for the night. I will pick it up tomorrow if I choose to. But tonight, I lay it down. The third step is the Shema itself. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. 6 words in Hebrew, Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Whether or not you are Jewish, whether or not you hold any religious belief at all, I want you to understand what this moment is doing in the body. You are making a declarative statement about unity, about wholeness. You are shifting from the fragmented, multi-threaded awareness of a busy mind to a single point of focus. In contemplative neuroscience, this is what is called a concentration practice. It activates the parasympathetic nervous system. It slows the breathing. It shifts brainwave activity from beta, the fast, problem-solving, anxious frequency, toward alpha and theta, the frequencies of deep relaxation and early-stage sleep. You do not need to understand Hebrew. You can say it in English. You can hold the intention of it, the feeling of wholeness, of completion, of the day being enough as it was. The point is the singular focus. 6 words spoken or thought that tell your nervous system, we are done for today. The fourth step is what I call the surrender. My grandmother Rachel described this as the part where you give it back. You place your right hand over your heart and you breathe slowly, deeply, and you consciously release the muscle tension you are holding. Jaw, shoulders, belly, hands. She told me, every night you carry home things that were never yours to keep. Worries for your children, worries for the world, other people's emergencies that became your emergency. Before sleep, you give them back. You are not responsible for carrying them through the night. This step takes no more than 2 minutes. Breathe in for 4 counts. Hold for 4 counts. Release for 6 counts. Repeat 4 times. This specific breathing pattern, what physiologists call extended exhale breathing, activates the vagus nerve and shifts the autonomic nervous system into parasympathetic dominance. Heart rate variability improves, cortisol drops, the glymphatic system, which I told you about earlier, can now do its work. That is the complete practice. 4 steps, 10 minutes, done before your head touches the pillow, accounting, release, the Shema, the surrender. What should you expect? In the first 24 hours, you may notice that falling asleep feels different, less effortful. In the first 7 days, most women I have worked with report fewer middle-of-the-night wakings. Not 0, but fewer, and with an easier return to sleep when they do wake. By 21 days of consistent practice, the physiological changes become measurable. Lower resting heart rate before sleep, reduced time to sleep onset, and the one that matters most to me as a physician, improved morning energy without depending on caffeine to function. I will be honest with you about something because I think you deserve honesty more than you need encouragement. There is a second component to this law, something my grandmother always taught alongside the practice I have just described, that significantly amplifies everything I have shared. It relates to what you consume in the 3 hours before bed, and it is rooted in a passage in Leviticus that most people have never connected to sleep. I will share that in a coming teaching because this second component requires its own full explanation to be practiced correctly. What I can tell you is that without it, this practice is genuinely powerful. With it, the transformation becomes something different entirely. I want to share something personal with you because I think it matters for you to know that I am not standing at a distance from this material. I am in it with you. There was a period in my 50s. I was living in Boca Raton. I had a full practice. I was teaching. I was traveling for research when I stopped doing this practice. Not intentionally, I simply let it slide. The evenings got full, the schedule got late, and I told myself I was too tired for the ritual, that I would simply sleep. I did this for about 4 months. And what happened over those 4 months was gradual but unmistakable. My sleep became shallower, my thinking became slower, my emotional resilience, my ability to absorb difficulty without it landing too hard, decreased noticeably. I was doing everything else right: my nutrition, my movement, my social connections. But without this practice, something in the nightly cycle of restoration was incomplete. I think about how much more relevant this is now in 2025 than it has ever been in my lifetime. The volume of information we process in a single day would have been unimaginable to previous generations. The news cycle alone, the wars, the political volatility, the economic anxiety, arrives in our hands constantly, demanding a response, demanding that we feel something, do something, say something, and then we are supposed to simply lie down and be still. The body needs help with that transition in a way it never used to. The practice I have shared today was designed for people living far simpler external lives than ours. If it worked for them, imagine what it can do for us. My grandmother used to say that these laws do not work like pills, one at a time, on demand. They work like a garden. All 7 laws together, tended with consistency, is what produces the transformation. The law I shared today is one root of that garden. But a root without the rest of the plant only goes so far. What you have learned today is real, it is ancient, and it is scientifically valid. The accounting, the release, the Shema, the surrender. These are not suggestions. In the Jewish tradition, caring for the body is not optional. It is Shmirat Haguf, the obligation to guard and preserve the vessel you have been given. The Talmud teaches that the body belongs not to you, but to God, held by you in sacred trust. To neglect it, including to neglect the nightly restoration it requires, is not neutral. It is a choice. And now that you know this practice, inaction is also a choice. I want to hear from you. Have you struggled with sleep? Have you been told to simply accept it? Tell me in the comments. I read every word, and what you share helps me understand what teaching to offer next. In my next teaching, I will share another of the 7 Jewish laws of longevity, one that most women over 50 have been practicing in exactly the wrong way without realizing it. It involves something you do every morning before you eat, and the way the Jewish tradition has structured it will surprise you, because it looks nothing like what you have been told to do. Make sure you have subscribed and that the bell notification is on, because this one I do not want you to miss. If this teaching reached you today, if it reminded you of something you had forgotten, or taught you something you had never known, please share it with one woman in your life who needs it. You may not know who needs it. Share it anyway. In our tradition, healing that is not shared is healing that is incomplete. Until next time, l'chaim, to life.